Let us discuss market structure. At the end of the lesson, students should be able to define various types of markets, namely perfect market, monopoly, monopolistic competition, oligopoly, duopoly. Should be able to describe the short-run and long-run condition of the market, as well as equilibrium condition of the market.
Right now we want to look at market structure. Market is a place where buying and selling takes place. Although market does not necessarily need to be a geographical location, once buying and selling and exchange when it comes to transaction takes place, then market can be referred to as that. Now we have different types of market that we will be discussing here. We have the perfect market, we have the imperfect market. Examples of imperfect markets are monopoly, monopolistic competition, monopsony, oligopoly, duopoly. We may not discuss all of them, but for the purpose of this study, we are going to discuss the key ones. Then you can refer to your book for the others. Perfect market or perfect competition. This is characterized by many buyers and many sellers. Products are the same, referred to as homogeneous. Firms take the prices dictated to them by the forces of demand and supply. Firms do not have control over the prices that rule in the market. There is free entry and free exit. Anybody can start a business today and quit tomorrow without any challenge, leave the industry without any difficulty. There is the absolute knowledge of the ruling price in the market, and there is perfect mobility of labor. Most agricultural produce are examples of perfect competition. Spinach, corn or maize, these are examples. So you see if sellers selling today, tomorrow they are no longer in the market. So perfect competition is a situation where the firms take the price. Nobody can sell a bunch of spinach for 50 pola. He or she will get no customer because spinach is spinach all over Botswana. So a seller will be forced to reduce the price to that level because individuals have the perfect understanding of the ruling price. So he or she will be forced to reduce the price to that level that he will be able to get his customers. Otherwise, they will just be losing in the market. Now, the demand curve for a perfect market is perfectly elastic because everybody has the knowledge of the price. The price hardly changes. If it changes, it is inconsequential and it is quite insignificant. A spinach cannot change from 5 pola a bunch to 50 pola a bunch. It can only fluctuate between 3 pola to 7 pola, which is the acceptable price in the market at this time. So the demand curve is perfectly elastic and the price does not change. The price is consistent, is constant, and that informs the reason why average revenue equals to marginal revenue equals to that demand curve. Now, in a perfect market, the demand curve for a perfect market is derived from the equilibrium demand and supply. So in perfectly competitive market, individual firms remain price takers. The price is determined by the intersection of the market supply and the demand curves. The demand curve for an individual firm is different from a market demand curve. The market demand curve slopes downward, while the firm's demand curve is horizontal. The firm's horizontal demand curve indicates a price elasticity of demand that is perfectly elastic, which means the equilibrium price is what the firm takes in a perfect market. And that informs the reason why we call them the price takers. Because the forces of demand and supply adjust the price adjust the quantity to a level of equilibrium. And since the price becomes stable and is constant, they take the price that an individual is willing to pay, and then they sell product at that similar price. And so that is the derivation of the perfect market curve. We must not forget. In perfect competition, any profit maximizing producer faces a market price equal to its marginal cost. That means P equals to MC. This implies that a factor's price equals the factor's marginal revenue product. So under conditions of perfect competition, the MR curve coincides with the AR curve. The AR curve is horizontal. Therefore, equilibrium condition of a perfect market is when MC equals to MR and equals to AR. Now let's study this curve. We will observe that the AR curve is stable, is constant, and the MR curve is also the same horizontal line. And this is as a result of the consistent or the constant price. If you remember the figure I gave you earlier, and you can also see it on the screen right now, where the price remains the same. This is the result of such a situation. And in such a situation, the equilibrium condition in the market is that output level. That means the output level is the output level at which MC equals to MR. MC cuts MR at that point. That is the profit maximization condition of a perfect market. Now, there are three circumstances or three situations in a perfect market: in the short run and in the long run. In the short run, a perfect market can experience supernormal profit. In the short run, can experience a subnormal profit or loss. And then in the long run, can also experience normal profit. In order to maximize profit, a firm should produce where MC equals MR. If marginal revenue does not equal MC, a firm can increase profit by changing the level of output. What happens to profit in response to a change in output is determined by that. So output level continues to change, and then firm also continues to adjust until MR equals to MC. This is an important decision that organizations must observe, otherwise they might lose eventually. Like I mentioned earlier, that in the short run, supernormal profit is derived by the difference between AC and AR, which is average cost and average revenue. So when average cost is less than average revenue, the firm is experiencing what we call a supernormal profit. Look at this adopted curve. This curve is showing the relationship between average revenue, which is equal to marginal revenue, and marginal cost. We can see between those points A and A that the average revenue, which is the marginal revenue, which is also the same thing as our demand curve and our price, is below the MC. So this is a short-run supernormal profit. By implication, at that lowest point, striking it up, a firm is making supernormal profit at that point. Any point outside those points is not supernormal profit for a firm. And the firm can enjoy that in the short run because there is new in the market, the product is new, people are familiarizing themselves with the product, accepting the product, the competitors are not many. So the firm has the chance to acquire as much revenue as possible, as much profit as possible in the short run. It's possible some firms experience losses when the average cost exceeds the current market price, And this is a situation where the firm has high cost, such that the market price is below the average cost. At the profit maximizing level, the firm is making economic loss. And when we look at it from the graph, we discover that the average total cost is above the marginal revenue. It's above the average revenue. It's above the price, which is nothing but a loss. In such a situation, businesses want to close down. They are not making any profit. Rather, they are losing. So it's a situation where there are so many competitors and they kicked off or they take customers away. And in such a situation, the business begin to experience loss. More often than not, businesses shut down in this situation. For businesses that do not shut down, in the long run, they experience what we call a normal profit. And in that situation, they are at the break-even point. The firm has the same cost, such that the market price is just equal the average cost curve. At the profit maximizing level of output, the firm is now making what we call a normal profit. You can see the equilibrium between the marginal cost, the average total cost, the marginal revenue. This is what we call a normal profit. So in the long run, some competitors will remain in the market, some will leave, and then profit becomes steady in the long run. One example of imperfect market is the monopoly. It's structured in such a way that it's a single firm that makes up the entire market. And the focus is to prevent competitors and enforce barriers. Water utilities is the only water utilities in Botswana. No close substitute, which are features of monopoly. No free entry, no free exit. There are so many restrictions, there are so many policies, there are so many conditions. There is a complete negation of competition, and they are price makers. They dictate the price in the market. Since there is a single firm, the firm and the industry are one and they're the same. And because they are price makers, they face a downward sloping demand curve. That means it can sell more, it can increase the price, it can reduce the price. Therefore, elasticity of demand factor is very important to him. So, a monopoly firm is a firm that sticks to production without any other competitors. There are different barriers to monopoly. Natural barrier, such as economies of scale, sociological barrier, actions by firms to keep other firms out, such as customs or traditions, or government barriers, such as policies and restrictions. So these are different types of barriers that monopoly use in order to chase or to keep away competitors. The condition for profit maximization in a monopoly is where MR is also equal to MC. Unlike competitive firms, MR is not equal to P. Why? Because in the monopoly firm, price changes. So long as the demand curve is downward sloping, MR will always be less than P. And MR curve lies below the P curve at every point, but not at the first point. Price curve is also the same as the average revenue curve. In the short run, a monopoly can face This is a table showing or depicting or illustrating changes in price for a monopoly firm. And this is the graph of a monopoly firm, where the MR is below the AR, and AR is the same thing as the price. So in as much as the price continues to change, the AR curve will always be equal to price. In the monopoly firm, there is also the equilibrium condition, where the MC cuts the MR from below. Therefore, the monopolist's profit maximizing level of output is where MR equals to MC. Now, the monopolist faces a downward or sloping demand curve, and marginal revenue lies below the average revenue curve. Therefore, in monopoly equilibrium, when MC is equals to MR, it is usually less than price, and price is also the same as average revenue. In the short run, there are different equilibrium conditions, and also in the long run. In the short run, a monopoly faces supernormal profit and loss. In the long run, the monopoly faces normal profit. So the monopolist maximizes profit at the point where MR is equal to MC. A monopoly firm that charges the same price to all customers will face average revenue curve, which will be the same thing as the demand curve, as we have mentioned before. Therefore, a profit maximizer firm, such as a monopoly firm, will produce where MR equals to MC. So this is a supernormal profit condition of a monopoly firm, where the AR is greater than AC, or is above AC. And when you look at it from the graph, it is obvious you can see that the AR curve is below AC curve, which is the condition for supernormal profit. At this point, the monopoly is making an abnormal profit in the market. And don't forget that the company is the only seller. A monopoly is the only seller in the market. So it has that sole privilege to dictate the price. They are price makers. They are not price takers. A monopoly can also experience loss where the average cost is higher than average revenue. And this you can see from the graph, showing the average cost curve above the average revenue is a loss in a monopoly firm. And this is the normal profit of a monopoly firm in the long run, where AR, which is P, equals to AC. In other words, these are the three conditions for in the monopoly firm when it comes to profit, and these are the three profit levels of profit or types of profit a monopoly firm can experience. But irrespective of the level of profit, a monopoly firm continues to dictate the market and make the price rather, in the market, because it dictates the price. He is the price maker. There is no substitute. There are no competitors. There are barriers to entrance when it comes to such a product or such a commodity in the economy. So try as much as possible to read other books for you to be able to master the diagrams, understand and interpret how to draw each of the diagrams. Monopolistic competition is also close to monopoly competition when it comes to the graph. But in monopolistic competition, there is freedom of entry and exit, and firms can differentiate their products. For example, we have Tastic Rice, we have Uncle Sam, we have Spa, we have Choppies, among others. Therefore, they have inelastic demand curve. They can set price as well. But because of their freedom of entry, supernormal profit will encourage more firms to enter the market, which will eventually lead to normal profit. Because the more the competitors, the more the extra profit reduces. Because all competitors are scouting for the available customers. So this eventually leads them to a normal profit. Like we have said, there are many firms. There is freedom of entry and exit. Firms produce differentiated products. Firms have price inelastic demand. That means they are price makers. Those goods are highly differentiated. Firms make normal profit in the long run. But in the short run, they definitely make the supernormal profit because every rational consumer wants to have a taste of that product, have a feel of that service, and they are allocatively and productively inefficient. In the short run, like we have mentioned, monopolistic competition can make a supernormal profit where MRC and the supernormal profit is have adopted this graph is at that shaded point. They can experience loss in the short run when the average total cost is greater than average revenue, and in the long run they can experience what we call a normal profit where the average total cost is equal to the price. Oligopoly. This is a market situation in which a firm bases its market policy in part on the expected behavior of a few close rivals. Now, usually, oligopoly occurs when a few firms dominate the market. So when there are a small number of competing firms, maybe between 2 or 10, dominating the entire market, then their market decisions can exhibit a very strong mutual interdependence. Now let's quickly look at the features of oligopoly. Industry dominance by few large firms, such as the airline, cable television services, oil and gas, pharmaceuticals, mass media, entertainment. So compared or considering the rate at which businesses are expanding today, oligopoly is dominated by few large firms. Number two, products that can be homogeneous, such as petrol, aluminium industries, steel industries. These are intermediate goods, and these goods are used by other industries later for manufacturing the product. Or they can be differentiated products, which can be products that customers consume and they use for the various needs, such as automobiles, among others. Interdependence. When there is any change in price and other economic situations by a firm, it will also affect the pricing policy of the rivals because the competition is limited. So one way or the other, these businesses are interdependent on one another. Entry barrier. This helps businesses to exercise market control. There is government restrictions, there is copyright and patent issues, there is a huge setup cost, among others. So these are barriers that other businesses are finding very challenging for them to be able to cross over and be part of the business. Also, is characterized by the advertising and marketing cost. Now, businesses undertake aggressive marketing and advertising initiatives under oligopoly. And this is done in order to gain a very huge market share. So, this is one feature of oligopoly business. Airline is a very good example. The rate at which airlines advertise their product per time is very outrageous. So these are and this is done because there are few large firms in the market. So these are characteristics of oligopoly. Do you know other characteristics of oligopoly? Go through your notes, go through your text, absorb as much knowledge as possible, and then we are going to discuss it when next we meet in the class. What are the causes of oligopoly? Number one, economies of scale. Now, if the productive capacity of a firm, which is just a few firms, if it's very large or big enough to be able to capture a greater percentage of the total available demand for the product in the market,
then there will be a very few firms in such an industry. And so these firms that are remaining, they have every investment. Their technologies are so improved. And they reap economies of scale when it comes to production, when it comes to sales, when it comes to production and promotion rather. And therefore they have the ability and the capability to stay and be retained in the market. Barriers to entry can also be a cause of oligopoly, and we have mentioned it the other time. These are controls that are enforced by the business or by the government, of which the few large firms are able to comply with and cope with and handle. And so this makes them to be retained in the market. Oligopoly can also be as a result of merger. Sometimes when few firms that are strong, when they perceive new entrants of another firm, they can merge together, join policy together, join pricing, production, distribution strategies together. And this can result into oligopoly. Also, we have what we call mutual interdependence. As the number of firms is small in an oligopolistic industry, they keep a strict watch of the price charges by rival firms in the industry. Most of the time, the firms avoid price war. And what they're trying to do is to create conditions of mutual interdependence. Kinked Demand Curve is used to explain the implication of changes in price in an oligopoly market. Now, Kinked Demand Curve has two distinct segments. And these two different distinct segments, they have two different elasticities, and they join at the corner, okay? Or they join to form a corner or to form a kink. And the essence of Kinked Demand Curve is to explain the reason behind the price rigidity in oligopoly. Now, it comprises of two segments. One is relatively more elastic, and that results if a firm increases its price, and the other is relatively less elastic, which results if a firm decreases its price. If a firm really cuts price, then they will gain a very huge increase in market share. But unfortunately, most of the time, firms do not allow this. Therefore, other firms will follow suit and they will cut price as well. And therefore, demand will only increase by a small amount. So, Kinked Demand Curve expresses or shows or reveals or explains the reason why there is usually price rigidity in oligopoly. So read other texts, your handbooks, your references to gain more knowledge on market structure.